Okay. Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today we are refilming this video that I have already filmed, and I did it while I was like getting ready, but it was getting dark and it was just disorganized. So now you get me with no makeup except for mascara and chapstick, and I'm wearing my like grandpa cardigan. So it's a downgrade for sure, but I hope that the content itself is a little bit better. So that's what we're going for. Kate's here with me. We're sitting in my room and we're gonna do an end of the year book tag. I have a few other like end of year style videos of like 5-star reads, like just talking that kind of thing. And of course my December reading wrap up coming at the end of this month. But I saw Destiny and Sarah and just the book girlies do this, so I took some questions from their videos and we're gonna do just like an end of the year talk about the books that I liked, what I didn't like, and also it's a way for me to maybe talk about books that I don't talk about as often, or just it's not 5 stars but it was still really good, things like that. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with the first one being the most disappointing books that I read this year. For most of these I chose multiple books just so I could talk about more than one. So I have 3 books that I thought qualified as most disappointing, and those are Sense and Second Degree Murder, Obsession Falls, and A Curse for True Love. So I'll start talking about Sense and Second Degree Murder. This is supposed to be like a murder mystery retelling of Sense and Sensibility. I also read Sense and Sensibility this year, and so I knew what to expect. I like thought the story was going to be more similar to Sense and Sensibility, and it just is not. I think it was a pretty poor retelling, and I was disappointed because I like Sense and Sensibility, and this is also like a second in a series, and I liked the other one, so I was disappointed. Obsession Falls. This, although a first like in a series, I had read other books by Claire Kingsley, who's the author, set in the same town, and was expecting it to be like that, and it just wasn't. This was like there was a stalker situation. I was looking forward to this release and I was disappointed. And finally, and maybe most controversially, A Curse for True Love, which is the 3rd book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Not to say that this book was not good. That's not what disappointing means. To me, disappointing is I had really high hopes and this did not live up to it. The first 2 books were good. The first one was good. The second one was great. And the 3rd one went back down to good. So in this grand scheme of like how I think a trilogy or a series should work is it gets better as you go. And this one did not. The last one just, it flopped. It fell flat for me. So I, for that reason, am naming it one of my most disappointing books of the year. Next, we have Underdog Books, a book that I wasn't expecting to like and I loved, and those 2 are Out on a Limb and 5 Survive. So 5 Survive should not have been an underdog. I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, also by Holly Jackson. And in theory, I should have known that I was gonna love 5 Survive, but I had been sitting on my shelf for like a year and I had not read it. I finally picked it up and lo and behold, it was good. So kind of my own fault, but it did end up being really good. So props to Holly Jackson. She writes a great book. And then Out on a Limb, I saw one singular TikTok about this book and immediately was like, oh, I want to read that. It was 5 stars. I've now read it twice this year. I recently reread it just because I love the story. I love the main characters. They have a great relationship and it's accidental pregnancy done right. If you're going to do accidental pregnancy, it needs to be like they get pregnant at the beginning and it's not a plot device that someone uses later in the story. Like it needs to be the whole plot. I think that's the only right way to do accidental pregnancy. And Helena Bonham Young did such a good job. So that was my Underdog books. Next we have Overhyped. So these are books that TikTok, Book Talk, BookTube made me think were going to be really good, and then they weren't. And that's Archer's Voice, Royally Not Ready, and Things We Never Got Over. So Things We Never Got Over, Lucy Score, everyone loves it. I have loved some Lucy Score books. Not to say I didn't love this one, it just was very underwhelming. And based on the hype that I had heard about it, I thought that it was going to be the best book I had ever read. It just wasn't. Royally Not Ready, I don't know how well this falls into this category of overhyped, but I did see several TikToks about it that were like claiming it to be like a spicy Princess Diaries, and I was like, ooh, I like that. And it was spicy. I don't know how similar it was to Princess Diaries, and I maybe just had the wrong idea going into it. Could be my fault, could be TikTok's fault, we'll never know. I didn't like it. So, there's that. Moving on to Archer's Voice. I read this for book club, but everyone talks about Archer's Voice like it's a stunning piece of work. And I did not feel that way. I thought it was cringe. I thought the characters were not well developed. It was overhyped. Next, books that surprised me. Boyfriend material. The Crescent City books, but most specifically the first one, House of Earth and Blood, By a Thread, and You Deserve Each Other. I'll start with You Deserve Each Other. It's a rom-com, but it's like a divorce / married person rom-com. Hey, Kate, come on, jump up here. And I didn't think I was gonna like that, but I did, and it was really good. By a Thread, again, I've read some Lucy Score that I've liked, but I never expect a Lucy Score book to be groundbreaking, but this one was actually really good, and I loved Dom. He's such a great MMC, so approved. And House of Earth and Blood, I think I just looked at it and was like, this is a lot, this is intimidating. I have read other SJM, like I've read ACOTAR, I've read Throne of Glass at this point, but looking at it, I got intimidated and didn't think that I was gonna like it because I knew it was like a modern setting. Shame on me for that, because this is so good and I cannot wait for the third book in the series to come out in January. I'm so excited for it. And finally, Boyfriend material. I thought this was going to be similar to Red, White, and Royal Blue just because it's like a gay romance and there's like a Brit involved, but it is not similar, and it was totally different and its own unique and special thing that I loved. And I just read the second one recently because I wanted to get more of the characters. So the next questions are your favorite characters and your favorite couples, but I combine them and I'm just going to rapid fire name the books with my favorite characters. Happy Place, The Boyfriend Candidate, Heartless, Willa and Cade. The age gap, The Single Dad, I love. Yours truly, Jacob is truly such a great representation of how anxiety manifests, and I think Abby Jimenez did a beautiful job writing him. I still think about him and their relationship, but mostly him and how well represented she talked about like people with anxiety. I loved it. Kingdom of Ash, obviously all of the characters in the Throne of Glass series, but I mean specifically Aelin and Rowan, they are currently the lock screen on my phone. I love them and wish that I was not done with them. I will probably reread that series. It's right here soon because it's so good. And really all of the characters are great, but specifically them. We have Xaden and Violet, and really like Sawyer, Rydok, Rhiannon, Liam, the whole cast of characters in that book, amazing. The Scarlet Princess, which is the Lachlan Feuds series I talked about recently, and Rowan, the FMC in this series, amazing. The Prison Healer, better than the movies, a reread that I love. Liz and Wes will always be couple goals to me. Red, White, and Royal Blue, and those are my favorite characters and couples. Next, we have an author that I discovered this year. One of these is Elsie Silver. I definitely discovered her this year, had never read any of her books before, and now I've read all of her books. I love Chestnut Springs, and I also really love the Gold Rush Ranch series, which follows the sister of like the Eaton brothers from Chestnut Springs. So it follows their sister and her life at a different like ranch, but I think she's a great author. I cannot wait for her new book that's going to come out next year, and very glad that I discovered her this year. And next I have SJM on here in this category because although I had read ACOTAR, I read ACOTAR almost 2 years ago now, in the beginning of 2022. It's almost 2024 now, but that was the only SJM I had read. This year I read both all of Throne of Glass and the 2 Crescent City books, and now I'm rereading ACOTAR because of how much I love the worlds that she created. Like, no one does it like her, really. And although I knew of her, I feel like I really discovered how great she is and how brilliant her mind is when I read Throne of Glass and Crescent City this year. And I'm so excited to like keep reading more of her and get more stuff from her and dive into those worlds more. Next, we have the book books that made me feel happy. And these have to be a YA rom-com. I don't think you can talk about happy books without talking about YA rom-coms. And in the effort of talking about different books, I selected books that I haven't talked about, which would be What Happens After Midnight by Cale Walter. So good. So many Taylor Swift references. 5 stars. Like, I love this book, and you really cannot feel sad when you're reading a YA rom-com. Something about a good YA rom-com. Something about a good YA rom-com with the banter, just like the cute flirtiness, is it unmatched. And that's how I feel in What Happens After Midnight. And really, my other one is Betting on You by Lynn Painter, but really any Lynn Painter book. But I talk about Better Than the Movies a lot, so I wanted to mix it up. And this is her new release, and I highly recommend all of her YA books. She also has some adult books, but the YA ones just, and Betting on You was so good. I laughed, I was smiling. It's just so cute. I recommend for sure if you're looking for something that's just gonna make you smile. Next, we have most frustrating books. For this category, I have selected From Lukov with Love. Mariana Zapata is known for writing a slow burn. I read this at the beginning of this year, and I still think about these characters and this, like, you know they're supposed to be together. You know it. They might even know it, but they don't get together until you've read 400, 500 pages. You're like at the end and you're like, oh my gosh, the tension, the building, it's crazy and frustrating, but I loved it. We have Love Theoretically by Allie Hazelwood. Also kind of for the same reason of like, we know things that the characters don't know as like the reader, and they don't connect the dots or they don't communicate it, and it's frustrating. Hello, I'm like, if you talked or asked a question about this, you would know. Gotta calm down a little bit, but needless to say, I still love that book. Both of those books still love, but frustrating to read at times. And then this one is a book that I absolutely just didn't love and should have DNF'd. That's The Book Proposal. I hardly ever talk about books that I don't like, obviously, because why would I talk about them? I really only recommend books that I like. That's the purpose of this channel, is to talk about books I like. That being said, I don't like the book proposal. And I would not recommend. That's not to say that you wouldn't like it. I didn't. Best book adaptation. And I think the only book that can be in this category is Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. It caused the Hunger Games resurgence. Like, the book is so good. The movie is so good. If you have not seen the movie, watch it. If you have not read the book, read it. Like, truly, all of the Hunger Games adaptations are top tier, and this was no exception. Best covers. The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer, Done and Dusted by Lila Sage, Happy Place by Emily Henry, and Powerless by Lauren Roberts. These are some of my favorite book covers of the year. There are many more stunning, beautiful ones, and some of my favorites happen to be Barnes & Noble exclusives. So I love the Crescent City. I have House of Sky and Breath and House of Earth and Blood in the Barnes & Noble exclusive covers, and they are stunning. The artwork is to die for, but I really tried to narrow this down to books that are just the original cover, not an exclusive edition or a special edition, because obviously special editions and exclusive ones they're more money, they're supposed to be beautiful, they're collector's items. So as much as those are beautiful, I don't think that they qualify for this category. And there are a few other collector's editions that I've bought this year that are stunning but don't qualify. Next we have the cringiest books that I read this year. I'm gonna start off by saying The Book Proposal. They talk about sharding in the first 20 pages. It was horrible. Obsession Falls, I also already talked about this. It was like a stalker situation. I didn't like it. It was cringy. And finally, Star-Crossed Holiday. This is cringy for the fact that, like, how can a Christmas famous person romance not be cringy? Like, it's like Chris Evans vibes, Falls for the Small Town Girl. It's a Hallmark movie. It's a Christmas Hallmark movie in a book. And you can't help but cringe, but in the best way. That's the only cringe one that I was like, recommend. Next are books that were unpopular, but that I loved. So I actually went on Goodreads and looked to see books that had low Goodreads ratings and books that I gave 4 or 5 stars. So those two are The Ex-Hex and Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey. So the Tessa Bailey one is actually the first in a series. I read both this year and enjoyed both. I do think Secretly Yours is better than the other one, and it has a low Goodreads score, but I thought it was 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. And The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. Another one came out this year that was like something similar, another like Halloween-esque rom-com. Is it gonna be fine art? No. Do I still love it? Yes. Next we have the lowest rated book that I read this year and the highest rated book that I read this year. So the lowest rated book on Goodreads that I read was Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, and they actually just turned this into a movie on Netflix, so clearly some people liked it, but not enough people that it had a high rating on Goodreads. And Kingdom of Ash, The Throne of Glass finale. I will say this with a caveat: books that are in a series, especially the last book in a series like Kingdom of Ash, have a much higher chance of having a high rating because you've read 6 books up to that point. Obviously the people that are reading it are going to like it because they are invested. They have read thousands and thousands of pages to get to that point, especially Kingdom of Ash. It's such a long book, and the only people that read it are the people that are invested in it, so obviously it has a very high rating on Goodreads. And I also loved it, so I'm not complaining. Next we have some of my favorite quotes. I was feeling kind of lazy for this portion of the video, and I did not search through my books, any of my books that I had annotated, and look for good quotes, although I know there are some. But I do have a few from my Kindle, and they're all from Kingdom of Ash. Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom. You do not yield. I would get that tattooed on my body. Her name was Aelin Ash River Whitehorn Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. Sorry if I pronounced her name wrong, but truly one, if not the best book that I read this year was Kingdom of Ash, and really just the Throne of Glass series. These characters will always be with me, always. And I would get these things tattooed on my body. I would get a Fireheart tattoo. I would get a Do Not Yield tattoo. I love it. Moving on, we have books with the most unique concepts, and those are going to be Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood, Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young. So Next of Kin is the two main characters are fostering their siblings, and they can't foster them by themselves because they can't afford to. So they team up to live together so they can like join their incomes and be able to foster their siblings. It's a rom-com, they fall in love, but it's unique. I had never read anything like that for a rom-com. So props to Hannah for that. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. If you're looking to get into fantasy of any kind, I think this is such a good light fantasy that is unique and different. I loved like the World War II vibes. It is such a light, like it is fantasy, but it's light. It's very easy to understand, but the concept with the typewriters is so unique, and I loved it. And finally, Love Theoretically. I think not that a STEM romance is very unique in itself. I know they're out there, but I thought that this specific storyline was unique, and I also kind of learned something. And I know Ali Hazelwood did a lot of research and does a lot of research for her STEM romances to like make them accurate, and I appreciate that. The final question where I'm going to talk about books that I already read this year is books that I would love to reread. Of course, on my 5-star reads, I reread books all the time. I love to reread. That's why I keep books. That's why I have a collection, is because just because I read it doesn't mean I'm done with it. But a book that I would love to reread that I've been thinking about recently is Begin Again by Emma Lord. This is a YA rom-com, but I think it has some really good messages that made me cry and made me laugh, and I've recommended this book to friends and they loved it. I think if you're looking for like a YA rom-com, I would recommend this one for sure. Next, we have the whole Entangled with Fae series. This was like a Kindle Unlimited binge I went on where I read like all 5 books in 2 days. And because of that, I read them very quickly, and I would love to reread them and like just get back into that world, because I think the concept is fun and interesting, and I loved the stories. So those are books that I would be interested to reread sometime soon. And then finally, I'm going to talk about my reading goal for the year and the reading goals that I'm going to try and reach next year. So my goal this year was to read 96 books, which when I was setting my goal at the beginning of the year, I did some math, obviously, and 96 books is 8 books a month. That was my rationale. I was like, I can read 8 books a month. It will be kind of, in my mind, I was thinking it would be kind of a stretch, because last year I read like 70 books. I was like, 96 will be a stretch. I'll be reading more, but I think I can do it. I hit 96 books in July this year. Halfway through the year, I was already at my reading goal, and so I just kept reading like I was reading, and I'm currently at 171 books. I might get close to 180 by the end of the year, because I still have a few weeks left. I don't think I'm going to read 10 books in the next 3 weeks, but I could read 5 more. With that being said, next year's reading goal, am I going to set it to be 170? No, because I think setting too ambitious of a reading goal is a recipe for a book slump. I think if I set a reading goal that is going to stress me out and cause me anxiety, that's not the purpose. I read because I like to read, because it's fun. And it's entertainment. It's my favorite hobby. When it becomes work, a chore to try and reach this goal, that defeats the purpose of it. So I'm thinking I'm probably going to set a goal somewhere in the 125 range, because that's obviously more than the goal I set last year, which was 196. No, which was 96. And it's less than trying to read as much as I read this year, because I read a lot this year and that is unusual for me. Not unusual, but some months were out of pocket with how much I was reading. And I don't want to say that that's normal or something to expect in the coming months or the next year. So I want to give myself some grace that I probably won't read that much all the time. And I think 125 is a safe number. So as far as actual books that are on my radar that I would like to read next year, this year I said I read Sense and Sensibility. I've also read Pride and Prejudice, not just for school, but for pleasure. And I would really like to read all of Jane Austen's catalog. So will I read more than one classic, not with this, but classic a year? It's possible I will, but I don't want to make promises I can't keep. But I do want to read another Jane Austen next year, and I'm thinking that's going to be Emma, because I love the movie. I already know the storyline because of the movie, and that way when I get confused, I still kind of will know what's going on because I've seen the movie. So that is on my radar for next year, is Emma. Also, I would love to read more mystery / thrillers next year. I mostly read fantasy and romance this year. Those are my two favorite genres, and I will still be reading tons of those. That being said, I also read some mystery thriller books this year that I loved. And I think I only read probably 10, maybe less, mystery thriller books out of 170. And I liked them. So I would love to read more of that genre and branch into that more. So those are my kind of goals for next year. I'm thinking 125 as my number. I'm going to read Emma, and I want to read more mystery and thrillers. So that is my yearly wrap up, my book tag. Thank you for watching and for following my reading journey this year. It's truly evolved, and the person and the reader that I was at the beginning of the year is totally different from the reader that I am now. And I can't wait to see where we go. I still have fun videos planned for the rest of the year, like I said. So if you're interested, subscribe, come back, and I will see you somewhere else on the internet. Bye, guys.